A small-town coffee shop buzzed with the usual morning clamor, cups clinking, baristas calling orders, and the low hum of chatter. In the corner, a man with a weathered face and a prosthetic leg sat quietly, his German shepherd lying at his feet, eyes sharp and ears perked. The dog's vest read, "Service Animal," but to Karen, who stood at the counter tapping her foot, it was just another inconvenience. Why would anyone bring a dog into a coffee shop? She turned, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Excuse me, sir, you must taking up space. Can you, move it?" The room froze. Eyes darted toward the man, who didn't flinch. His name was Ethan Cole, a veteran who'd lost his leg in Afghanistan. But Karen didn't know that. She didn't know he trained elite search and rescue dogs for the Army, dogs that saved lives in disasters and war zones. All she saw was a man with a cane and a dog she didn't like. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, just patted his dog, Ranger, and sipped his coffee. Karen, emboldened by the silence, scoffed. Some people think they're entitled to special treatment. The barista, a young woman with wide eyes, tried to intervene, but Karen waved her off. "No, I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. This isn't a pet store." The air grew thick, the kind of tension that makes your chest tight. Ethan's hand stilled on Ranger's head, and for a moment, it seemed like he might speak. Instead, he stood, his cane tapping the floor, and left without a word, Ranger trailing loyally behind. Whispers followed. Some glared at Karen, others looked away, but she just shrugged, oblivious to the storm she'd stirred. Outside, Ethan paused, his breath visible in the crisp morning air. He wasn't angry. Not yet. He'd faced worse than Karen's words. But something about her smugness, her assumption that she knew his story, lit a spark in him. He glanced at Ranger, whose steady gaze seemed to say, "We've got work to do." Ethan nodded. He wasn't one for confrontation, but he wasn't one to back down either. Back inside, Karen posted about the encounter on her social media, a quick rant about entitled people and their pets. She didn't expect it to go viral. She didn't expect the comments to flood in, some agreeing, others tearing her apart. And she definitely didn't expect Ethan to see it. By noon, the post had spread through the town's online groups, and people started piecing things together. Ethan wasn't just some guy with a dog. He was a hero, a man who'd served his country and now trained dogs that found survivors in rubble and ruin. The tide was turning, and Karen had no idea what was coming. The coffee shop incident wasn't just a moment. It was the start of something bigger, something that would unravel lives and rebuild them in ways no one could predict. Ethan drove home, his truck rattling down a dirt road to a small training facility where he worked with his dogs. The place was simple, a few kennels, an obstacle course, and a field where he ran drills. Ranger bounded out, eager to work, and Ethan's focus shifted. He didn't care about Karen's words, not really. He cared about the mission, training dogs to save lives. But as he worked, his phone buzzed with notifications. Friends, neighbors, even strangers were tagging him in Karen's post. "This or?" One message read, linking to a screenshot. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He didn't want to fight, but he wasn't invisible. Not anymore. That evening, a local reporter caught wind of the story. A small article went up, titled "Local Veteran Shamed in Coffee Shop Incident." It included a photo of Ethan and Ranger at a training session, the dog mid-leap, Ethan's face focused and proud. The article didn't name Karen, but it didn't need to. The town knew. Comments poured in, praising Ethan, condemning the mystery woman. Karen, scrolling through her phone at home, felt her stomach drop. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was just venting, right? She tried to delete the post, but it was too late. Screenshots lived forever. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the coffee shop again. Same time, same table. Ranger lay at his feet, calm as ever. The room was quieter now, eyes flickering toward him with respect, curiosity, maybe guilt. Karen wasn't there, but her absence spoke volumes. She was at home, staring at her phone, the comments piling up. "How could you say that to a veteran?" one read. "Do you even know what he does?" another demanded. Karen's fingers hovered over her keyboard, itching to fire back, to defend herself. But what could she say? She didn't know Ethan's story. She didn't know he'd pulled children from earthquake rubble, that his dogs had sniffed out survivors in hurricanes. She didn't know, and that ignorance was her first mistake. Ethan, meanwhile, wasn't thinking about Karen. He was thinking about his next training session, about a call he'd gotten from the Army. A disaster relief mission was coming up, and they needed him and Ranger. He didn't have time for petty drama, but the town did, and the town wasn't done with Karen. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the training field where Ethan worked with his dogs. Ranger darted through an obstacle course, weaving between poles, leaping over barriers, his movements precise and powerful. Ethan's voice was steady, guiding the dog with commands honed over years of discipline. This was his world, dirt under his boots, the sharp bark of a well-trained dog, the purpose that kept him grounded. But his phone kept buzzing, pulling him back to the coffee shop incident. He ignored it first, but when he finally checked, the notifications were relentless. The article about him had exploded, shared across platforms, picking up likes and comments from people he'd never met. Hero, they called him. Inspiration. Ethan didn't feel like either. He was just a man doing his job. Still, the support felt good, like a shield against Karen's careless words. Karen, meanwhile, was unraveling. Her phone was a battlefield, each notification a jab. "You're disgusting," one comment read. "Apologize to him," demanded another. She'd locked her social media accounts, but the screenshots kept circulating. Her name wasn't in the article, but it didn't matter. People knew. Small towns had long memories. She sat at her kitchen table, coffee cold, scrolling through the hate. She wanted to scream that it was a misunderstanding, that she wasn't a monster. But the truth gnawed at her. She'd judged Ethan without knowing him. She'd seen the cane, the dog, and assumed he was less. Now the town saw her as less. At the training field, Ethan's focus wavered. A friend had sent him a link to a new post. Not Karen's, but a video. It was grainy, taken by someone in the coffee shop during the incident. Ethan watched himself stand, his face unreadable, Ranger at his side. The video ended with Karen's voice, sharp and mocking. "Some people think they're entitled." The caption read, "This is who she insulted." Ethan's stomach twisted. He didn't want this. A public feud. A spectacle. But the video was out there, racking up views. And then came the twist. The video's uploader wasn't just some bystander. It was Karen's cousin, Lisa, who'd been at the coffee shop that morning. Lisa had filmed it quietly, not to expose Karen, but to show her later, to make her see how cruel she'd sounded. Lisa hadn't meant for it to go public, but someone else had shared it, and now it was everywhere. Lisa called Karen, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said. "I just wanted you to understand." Karen hung up, tears burning her eyes. Betrayed by her own cousin. She wanted to lash out, to blame Lisa, the town, anyone but herself. But deep down, she knew she'd lit the match. Ethan, unaware of the family drama, was dealing with his own. His sister, Mia, showed up at the training field, her face tight with worry. "You okay?" she asked. Ethan shrugged. "It's just noise." But Mia wasn't so sure. "People are talking about a protest outside that woman's house," she said. Ethan froze. A protest? That was too far. He didn't want Karen's life destroyed. He just wanted to do his work. "Tell them to stop," he said, his voice low. Mia nodded, but her eyes said she wasn't sure they would. By evening, the story had spread beyond the town. A national news outlet picked it up, framing it as a clash between a heartless woman and a heroic veteran. Ethan's phone rang. Reporters wanting interviews. He declined them all. But Karen wasn't so lucky. Her workplace, a local real estate office, was getting calls. "Fire her," people demanded. Her boss, a stern woman named Diane, called her in. "Is this true?" Diane asked, holding up a printout of the article. Karen's throat tightened. "I didn't know who he was," she stammered. Diane's eyes were cold. "That's not the point." Karen left the office, her job hanging by a thread. She drove home, passing the coffee shop, now a symbol of her mistake. A group of people stood outside holding signs. "Support our veterans," one read. "Shame on Karen," said another. Her heart pounded. This wasn't just online anymore. It was real in her face. She pulled into her driveway, hands shaking, and saw a note taped to her door. It was from Lisa. "I'm sorry," it read. "Let's talk." Karen crumpled it, tears spilling. She didn't want to talk. She wanted to disappear. Back at the training field, Ethan worked late, the stars bright above. Ranger lay beside him, sensing his unease. Ethan didn't want Karen's life ruined, but he couldn't control the town's anger. He thought about the mission coming up. A hurricane had hit a coastal town, and his dogs were needed. That was what mattered, not this drama. But as he packed his gear, a text came through from an unknown number. "Meet me tomorrow," it read. "I need to make this right." It was Karen. The morning air was heavy with the scent of rain as Ethan pulled into the coffee shop parking lot. Ranger sat upright in the passenger's seat, ears twitching, as if he sensed the weight of the moment. Ethan wasn't sure why he'd agreed to meet Karen. Her text had been short, desperate, but something in it, maybe the raw plea, had convinced him. He didn't want her groveling, but he wanted to understand why she'd lashed out. Inside, the shop was quiet, the usual buzz muted by the early hour. Karen sat in a corner booth, her hands wrapped around a mug, her face pale. She looked up as Ethan approached, Ranger at his side. For a moment, neither spoke. The tension was a living thing, coiling between them. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it, her eyes flickering to Ethan's cane, then away. "I didn't know," she finally said, her voice small. "About you. About what you do." Ethan sat, his movements deliberate, Ranger settling at his feet. "You didn't ask," he said, not cruelly, but with a weight that made Karen flinch. She wanted to explain, to spill the mess of her life, her stress, her bad day, her habit of speaking before thinking, but the words felt hollow. Ethan didn't care about her excuses. He wanted truth. "Why'd you say it?" he asked. Karen's eyes dropped to her mug. "I thought you were just some guy. I don't know. I was annoyed. The dog, the cane, it felt like you were taking up space that wasn't yours." Ethan's face didn't change, but his fingers tightened on his cane. "Space," he repeated, the word sharp. Karen nodded, tears welling. "I was wrong. I know that now." The conversation was cut short by a commotion outside. Through the window, they saw a small crowd, 5, maybe 6 people, holding signs, their voices rising. "Justice for Ethan," one shouted. Karen's face drained of color. Ethan stood, his jaw tight. "Stay here," he told her, and stepped outside, Ranger at his side. The crowd quieted as he approached, their signs lowering slightly. "Go home," Ethan said, his voice calm but firm. "This doesn't fix anything." A woman in the crowd, her face flushed with anger, stepped forward. "She needs to pay for what she said." Ethan shook his head. "She's paying. Look at her." He gestured toward the window, where Karen sat, head bowed. The crowd hesitated, their anger faltering. Ethan didn't wait for a response. He turned back to the shop, Ranger's tags jingling softly. Inside, Karen was crying now, her hands covering her face. "I didn't mean for this," she whispered. Ethan sat again, his expression unreadable. "What did you mean, then?" Karen's story spilled out. Her crumbling marriage, her job stress, her cousin's betrayal. It wasn't an excuse, but it was context. Ethan listened, his silence neither forgiving nor condemning. Then came the twist. Karen revealed she'd once volunteered at an animal shelter years ago, before life hardened her. She'd loved working with the dogs, watching them learn, seeing their trust grow. "I stopped because I thought I didn't have time," she said, her voice breaking. "But seeing Ranger, it reminded me of what I gave up." Ethan's eyes softened, just a fraction. He hadn't expected that. The crowd outside dispersed, their energy spent, but the tension lingered. Ethan leaned forward. "You don't get to undo what you said," he told her. "But you can do better." Karen nodded, wiping her eyes. "Ow!" Ethan didn't answer right away. He was thinking about the hurricane mission, about the dogs he'd trained, about the lives they'd save. "Figure out what matters to you," he said finally. "Then fight for it." Karen left the coffee shop shaken, but determined. She didn't know how to fix this, but she wanted to try. Ethan, meanwhile, drove to the training field, his mind already on the mission. The confrontation had been raw, real, but it wasn't the end. It was a turning point. Karen spent the day reflecting, her phone off, the world's noise muted. She thought about the shelter, about the dogs, about the person she used to be. By evening, she'd made a decision. She called the local animal rescue, asking if they needed volunteers. It was a small step, but it felt like a start. Ethan, at the field, worked with Ranger under the setting sun. The dog moved with precision, a partner in every sense. Ethan's phone buzzed, a message from the Army. The hurricane mission was confirmed. They'd leave in 2 days. He looked at Ranger, then at the sky, and felt a quiet resolve. The world could judge Karen, but he wouldn't. He had lives to save. The hurricane's aftermath was chaos. Homes reduced to splinters, streets flooded, families searching for loved ones. Ethan and Ranger arrived at the disaster zone, a coastal town battered by wind and water. The Army had set up a command center, and Ethan's team was tasked with searching collapsed buildings. Ranger's nose was their best hope, trained to detect the faintest signs of life. Ethan moved with purpose, his cane steady on uneven ground, his focus absolute. Back in town, Karen was trying to rebuild too. She'd started volunteering at the animal rescue, cleaning kennels, walking dogs, relearning the rhythm of care. It was humbling, messy work, but it grounded her. She hadn't posted online since the incident, hadn't responded to the lingering comments. She wanted her actions to speak now, not her words. But the town hadn't forgotten. Whispers followed her at the grocery store or the gas station. That's her. People said, their eyes sharp. Karen kept her head down, but the weight was crushing. At the disaster site, Ethan and Ranger worked tirelessly. On the second day, Ranger caught a scent beneath a pile of rubble. Ethan signaled the team, his voice calm but urgent. They dug, guided by Ranger's insistent barks, and found a child, alive, curled in a pocket of debris. The rescue made local news, a bright spot in the tragedy. Ethan's name was mentioned, and the story of the coffee shop incident resurfaced, now with a new angle. The hero who didn't hold a grudge. Karen saw the report on TV, Ranger's face filling the screen, Ethan in the background, his expression focused. Her chest tightened. She'd mocked this man, this dog, without knowing their worth. The shame was a physical thing, heavy and unrelenting. She wanted to reach out, to apologize again. But what could she say that hadn't already been said? The twist deepened. Karen learned the shelter she volunteered at supplied dogs to Ethan's training program. One of the puppies she'd been working with, a scrappy mutt named Scout, was slated for his next session. The connection hit her hard. She was part of something bigger, even if indirectly. She threw herself into the work, training Scout with a focus she hadn't felt in years. But the town's judgment didn't ease. A petition circulated, calling for her to leave her job. Her boss, Diane, called her in again. "I can't keep you if this doesn't stop," Diane said. Karen nodded, her throat tight. She was losing everything. Her reputation, her career, maybe her home. At the disaster site, Ethan faced his own challenges. A second collapse trapped a rescuer, and Ranger was struggling to pinpoint the scent in the rain-soaked rubble. Ethan's leg ached, the prosthetic chafing against his skin, but he pushed through. He trusted Ranger, trusted their bond. Hours later, Ranger found a rescuer, alive but injured. Ethan carried him to safety, his own pain forgotten. The team cheered, but Ethan just knelt beside Ranger, whispering, "Good boy." The mission continued, each day a test of endurance. Ethan thought about Karen, briefly, wondering if she'd meant what she said about changing. He hoped so, but he didn't dwell on it. His world was here, in the dirt and chaos, saving lives. Karen, meanwhile, was crumbling. The petition had grown, and her landlord hinted at not renewing her lease. She sat with Scout at the shelter, the puppy's warmth a small comfort. She didn't know how to fight this, how to prove she was more than her mistake. Then she saw a news update. Ethan and Ranger had saved another life, a woman trapped for 3 days. The reporter called Ethan a quiet hero, and Karen felt a spark of resolve. She wouldn't let her mistake define her. She'd fight, not with words, but with action. She signed up for a training course at the shelter, learning to handle rescue dogs. It was hard, humbling, but it felt right. Ethan, back at base camp, got a call from Mia. People are still going after that woman, she said. Ethan sighed. Let go, Mia. She's got enough. But Mia wasn't so sure. She's volunteering now, she said. At the shelter. People say she's good with the dogs. Ethan paused, surprised. Maybe Karen was trying. Maybe she was worth rooting for. The mission stretched on, and Ethan's focus returned to Ranger, to the next life they'd save. Karen's world was falling apart, but she was building something new, one small step at a time. The disaster site was a maze of destruction, but Ethan and Ranger moved through it like they were born for it. The days blurred, search, find, save, repeat. Ethan's prosthetic leg was a constant ache, but he ignored it, his focus on Ranger's signals. They'd saved 6 people now, each rescue a small victory in a sea of loss. The news crews followed, their cameras catching Ethan's quiet strength, Ranger's relentless drive. Back home, the story was inescapable. Karen couldn't turn on the TV without seeing Ethan's face, Ranger's alert eyes. Each report was a reminder of her mistake, but also of her resolve. She'd been at the shelter every day, working with Scout, learning the commands, the patience, the trust. The puppy was a quick learner, and Karen felt a pride she hadn't known in years. But the town's anger hadn't faded. The petition to fire her had grown, and Diane gave her an ultimatum: resign or be let go. Karen chose to resign, her hands shaking as she signed the papers. She had no job, no plan, just a fragile hope in the shelter work. The twist came when Lisa, her cousin, showed up at the shelter. Karen hadn't spoken to her since the video leak, but Lisa's eyes were red, her voice soft. I didn't mean to ruin your life, she said. Karen wanted to snap, to blame her, but she saw the guilt in Lisa's face. I know, Karen said finally. They talked, slowly rebuilding what had broken. Lisa offered to help at the shelter, and Karen agreed, a small step toward healing. At the disaster site, Ethan faced a crisis. A school had collapsed, and survivors were trapped deep inside. Ranger was exhausted, his paws raw from the rubble, but he kept going. Ethan's own strength was fading, his legs screaming with every step. The team worked through the night, guided by Ranger's nose. They found a teacher, alive, clutching a student's backpack. The rescue was slow, grueling, but successful. Ethan collapsed afterward, his body spent. A medic checked him over, urging rest, but Ethan shook his head. Ranger's not done. Neither am I. The news spread, and the town's narrative shifted. Ethan wasn't just a veteran. He was a lifeline. Karen watched the report, Scout curled at her feet. She felt small, insignificant, but determined. She'd lost her job, her reputation, but she had this Scout, the shelter, a chance to be better. She wrote a letter to Ethan, not expecting a reply. I'm sorry, she wrote. I'm trying to make it right. She mailed it, her heart pounding. The petition against her petered out, the town's anger spent. Some began to notice her work at the shelter, the way Scout followed her, the care she showed. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Ethan, back at base camp, got the letter. He read it in the dim light of his tent, Ranger asleep beside him. Karen's words were raw, honest. He didn't reply, not yet, but he tucked the letter away. The mission ended, and Ethan returned home, exhausted but whole. The town greeted him like a hero, but he waved off the praise. He went back to the training field, Ranger at his side, ready to prepare for the next call. Karen, meanwhile, was finding her place. The shelter manager praised her work with Scout, suggesting she train for certification. Karen nodded, tears in her eyes. She'd lost so much, but she'd gained something too, a purpose. The town watched, some still skeptical, others softening. Ethan saw her one day, walking Scout near the training field. He didn't approach, but he watched, noting the way Scout responded to her, the confidence in her step. He nodded to himself, a silent acknowledgement. Karen didn't see him, but she felt a shift, like the world was giving her a second chance. The coffee shop incident was fading, replaced by stories of rescues, of dogs, of redemption. Ethan and Ranger returned to their work, their bond unbreakable. Karen kept training, kept learning, kept fighting to be more than her worst moment. The town was healing, and so were they. The training field was quiet, the morning mist clinging to the grass as Ethan worked with Ranger. The dog moved with precision, navigating obstacles with a grace that belied his scars. Ethan's leg ached less today, the routine grounding him after the chaos of the hurricane mission. He'd saved lives, Ranger at his side, and the town's praise had followed. But Ethan didn't care about the spotlight. He cared about the work, the dogs, the next life they'd save. Across town, Karen was at the shelter, Scout bounding around her as she practiced commands. She'd been at it for weeks, her hands steady, her voice calm. The shelter manager, a gruff man named Tom, watched with approval. "You've got a knack," he told her. Karen smiled, a flicker of pride breaking through her doubt. She'd lost her job, her standing in the town, but this, training Scout learning to trust herself, felt like a lifeline. The town's judgment had softened, but not vanished. Some still whispered, their eyes sharp when she passed. Others, though, saw her with Scout, saw the work she put in, and nodded in quiet respect. Karen didn't expect forgiveness, but she craved a chance to prove herself. The twist lingered. Scout was thriving, and Tom revealed he'd been chosen for Ethan's program. Karen would have to hand him over soon, a bittersweet milestone. She didn't know if Ethan knew she was training Scout, but the thought of facing him again made her stomach twist. She wanted him to see her progress, to know she was trying, but she feared his judgment. Ethan, meanwhile, was preparing for Scout's arrival. He'd heard about Karen's work at the shelter, snippets from Mia, and others. He didn't know the details, but he was curious. He remembered her letter, the raw honesty in it, and wondered if she'd meant it. He wasn't one for grudges, but trust was earned, not given. One morning, the shelter organized a small event, a demonstration of their rescue dog for the community. Karen was nervous, her hands sweaty as she led Scout through his paces. The crowd was small but attentive, and Karen felt their eyes on her, judging, waiting. Scout performed flawlessly, his trust in her absolute. Tom clapped her on the shoulder afterward, his grin wide. "You did good," he said. Karen's throat tightened. It was the first time in months she'd felt seen for something other than her mistake. Ethan was there, in the back, unnoticed. He couldn't check on Scout, but he watched Karen too. Her focus, her patience, it was a far cry from the woman in the coffee shop. He didn't approach her, but he left with a quiet respect. Karen didn't know he'd been there, but she felt a shift, like the world was tilting in her favor. Days later, Scout was transferred to Ethan's program. Karen said goodbye, her eyes wet as she hugged the puppy. "Be good," she whispered. Scout licked her hand, then trotted off with Ethan, who nodded at her, a small gesture that felt like a bridge. Karen returned to the shelter, training a new dog, her resolve stronger. The town's whispers were fading, replaced by stories of her work, her change. Ethan trained Scout, noting the puppy's confidence, a testament to Karen's effort. He didn't reach out, but he kept her letter, a reminder that people could grow. The coffee shop incident was a distant memory now, overshadowed by rescues, by dogs, by second chances. Karen's life wasn't what it had been, but it was something new, something hers. She walked taller, her purpose clear. Ethan and Ranger prepared for their next mission, their bond a quiet strength. The town watched, healing, learning, moving forward together. The sun rose over the training field, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink. Ethan stood at the edge, watching Ranger and Scout run drills together, their movements a dance of trust and skill. He'd seen a lot in his years, war, loss, redemption, but this felt like a quiet victory. Scout was a star, his training with Karen evident in every confident step. Ethan thought about her, the woman who'd sparked a firestorm with a few careless words. She'd changed, or was trying to, and that was enough for him. In town, Karen was finding her place. The shelter had become her anchor, the dogs her purpose. She'd started training a new puppy, a scruffy mutt named Hope, and the work filled her with a joy she'd forgotten. The town's judgment had faded, not gone but softened, replaced by cautious respect. People nodded at her now, some even smiled. She'd lost her old life, her job, her status, but she'd gained something better, a reason to keep going. The shelter event had been a turning point, a moment where she'd shown the town, and herself, that she was more than her mistake. She hadn't seen Ethan since Scout's transfer, but his nod that day stayed with her, a silent acknowledgement that she was on the right path. Ethan, meanwhile, was preparing for another mission. A wildfire was raging in the west, and his dogs were needed. He packed his gear, Ranger and Scout at his side, their trust in him absolute. The town had thrown a small send-off, a gesture of pride in their hero. Ethan accepted it quietly, his focus on the work ahead. Karen heard about the mission and felt a pang of awe. She'd mocked this man, not knowing his strength, his purpose. Now, she was part of it, even if only through Scout. She wrote another letter, shorter this time, and left it at the training field. "Thank you," it read, "for showing me what matters." Ethan found it later, tucked under a rock. He read it, his lips curving slightly, and slipped it into his pocket. The mission was grueling, smoke thick, terrain treacherous. Ranger and Scout worked tirelessly, finding survivors in the ash and ruin. Ethan pushed through, his leg aching but his resolve unbroken. Each life saved was a reminder of why he did this, why he trained his dogs, why he kept going. Back home, Karen's work at the shelter grew. She earned her certification, a milestone that felt like a rebirth. The town noticed, their whispers now of admiration, not scorn. Lisa volunteered alongside her, their bond mended, stronger for it. Karen didn't seek forgiveness. She sought growth, and she was finding it. One evening, Ethan returned, the mission complete. He drove to the training field, Ranger and Scout asleep in the back. The town was quiet, the stars bright. He thought about Karen, about her letter, about the way people could change. He didn't need her apology, but he respected her effort. Karen, at the shelter, was training hope under the same stars, her heart full. She'd fallen, but she'd risen, and that was enough. The coffee shop incident was a scar, but scars told stories of survival. Ethan and Karen, strangers bound by a moment, were both moving forward, their paths shaped by dogs, by purpose, by the chance to be better. The town watched, learned, and healed, a community made whole by second chances. End.